us continue with a reflection as part of our Lent with the beloved disciple, our parish retreat, just highlighting two parts from chapter 1, which is worth rereading. Servant leadership on page 51. In the Last Supper, when Jesus washes the disciples' feet, he says, "I have set you an example that you also should do as I have done to you. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." The disciples were stunned, and few of them could hardly accept what Jesus was doing. For example, for Peter, the apparent humility implied by such an act was totally inappropriate and certainly not square with any understanding of the Messiah, what he had of the person of the Messiah about this title. We remember that at Caesarea Philippi, Peter rejected out of hand anything that smacks of humiliation for the one whom he had been the first to acclaim as Messiah and the Christ of God. So the washing of the feet is something extraordinary. Our author in the meditation calls it servant leadership, but it's more than about how to lead a community. It is a lesson to every generation. This act of humility points to the very mission, to the very mystery of the Incarnation. God wanted to show us something from within human history. As St. Paul's letter to the Philippians puts it, "Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness. And being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross." This act has the power to reverse the most negative trends in our personal lives. This act of humility, the Incarnation within our lives, can revert the most negative trends in human history. Actually, it can heal wounds. When we sang Psalm 44, it wasn't an easy psalm. It is about the suffering of the people who are crushed down by their enemies, and they are in search. What is the cause that they are no longer victorious? Why they no longer can enjoy peace? And they find it in their unfaithfulness to God. That psalm can be read as a lament, as a song of conversion, as a song of admitting personal and collective sins when the community, the nation to which these people belong, are at war. This reflects the cruelty, the sufferings caused by war, which is the most negative event in the life of a community. In that psalm, there is no solution, there is no joyful acclamation that redemption is close at hand. The washing of the feet is the key. The ability to humbly attend someone's need and to become compassionate with the enemy, with the opponent, with ourselves, just as God accepts us all. That's the only way of mending and healing the situation. And if from our book we read just the 2-3 pages from page 55, when the author invites us to meditate on Christ's high priestly role, when he says to Peter that unless you do what I'm doing to you, you can have no share with me. And the author shares the image of the temple, how it was structured, partitioned from the court, the holy place, and the Holy of Holies. And where in the court, in the first part of the sanctuary, there were 2 items: the altar of the burnt sacrifice and a huge bronze washing basin. And the high priest started his preparation of the sacrifice for the people by washing himself, his hands in it. And we are called to contemplate Jesus' washing of the feet as an act of the high priest, as the act of our high priest, who purifies himself on our behalf and then enters into the Holy of Holies and comes out not simply as a high priest investment, as the high priest did at the time, when coming out of the Holy of Holies, on his vestment, the enamels, the precious stones radiated God's redemptive love and forgiving love, but he himself came out from this sanctuary as the risen Lord. So when we join his act of humility, understanding the other, understanding the enemy, accepting it with prayer, understanding our opponent in a conflicting situation, it is part of our joining Jesus' high priestly act. That's a redemptive act, the only act which can redeem, which can, as mentioned, revert the most negative trends and events in human history. And just as an image worth recalling, when the war between the inhabitants of planet Jupiter and Mars began 2 years ago, and the occupying Martian forces destroyed the country of Jupiter, it was a really cruel act, killing civilians, torturing their the prisoners of war and civilians. Then an artist came up with a painting, with a print, in which a victim of the invaders, a victim to this Martian wicked Red Army, was washing the feet of a soldier, of an occupying soldier. You could recognize him in his uniform, sitting on a chair, arms next to him, stretching out his foot. There was a washing basin and his foot was washed. That was the most moving image of reconciliation, which sums up the mission of the Incarnation. That humble high priestly role and act, which is the only act which can put an end to all wars, not only between those who live in Jupiter, but all our wars within the human community.